Good evening, everybody. Great to be back on this stage. Ooh, look at that. Of course, the last time I was here was with Christiana, which was also a very inspiring evening, and I can tell this one will be as well. Steve and Daniel did say to me before we started, look, just anything goes, you know, be as tough as you want to be, but it's kind of hard to be a hard ass to a rock star, right? I mean, it's like tearing Ziggy Stardust apart with David Bowie sitting on the stage.
Second time, and probably very last time, the rock star thing.
So there's a couple of things I wanted to mention just before we start. In fact, I'll mention this first one. It's timely from a news perspective, this, because today in Bonn, I think about 200 nations are getting together to talk more about the 2015 Paris Accord and really working on a rule book for that. That, of course, is in the context of the Trump administration and the uncertainty there. So we will talk a little bit about that as well. But with that sort of challenging piece in mind, let me start with this, and we will come back to it. But you've done so much at IKEA, Steve. You've clearly enjoyed it. Why on earth are you leaving IKEA?
That's a good, awkward question to start with, isn't it, really? No. I think these roles are time limited. You know, leadership is, I think there's a reason why you have term limits in office. So, and you should do in some places where people manage to escape those term limits.
But have you achieved what you want to achieve?
I would say I've achieved 80% of what I wanted to achieve. And we've built out a strong team. The business had, I would say, a good track record before and fantastic compliance, and it built up it started in 1992 with the first environment strategy, but we turbocharged it together over the last few years, and it's in a fundamentally different place now. So we're genuinely using sustainability woven through the business. For me, I look at going forwards, do I do another 6 years within that? Yep. Or do I go and try and grow sustainability businesses elsewhere? So that's what I'm going to do.
We'll come on to that at the end. But are you, just very quickly, on the back of this, are you happy with who they've put in place as your successor, or do you feel you're letting them down a little bit by leaving?
No, I'm delighted. I'm delighted. My commitment to Peter, my friend and our CEO, was when we first talked about the fact that when I said, Peter, it'll be time for a change soon. My commitment to him was I would land the succession process. And I'm delighted with Pia, who's acting CSO. I've worked with her for a long time. She's a fantastic person. She's brilliant. There's an incredibly strong team and matrix in the organisation. The leadership stands behind it. It's impossible not to do sustainability. And my long-term successor was my first pick for the role, and he's a fantastic values-driven person. So okay. We're in a totally different place. There was a tiny team. There was no strategy. There was no 3 billion of investment into sustainability, etc. The business has come a long way, and ambition builds on ambition. Success builds on success.
Let's get the US piece out of the way quickly now. It's something I spoke to Christiana about as well. It seems to me a lot of sustainability folk put on a very brave face when we talk about Donald Trump and the uncertainty there. Christiana talked about, look, it's not all about policy, it's more about innovation and technology and working with the corporates. Do you feel that brave as well when you talk about it, or are you kind of pissed off about it?
This is my non-IKEA. Take any IKEA affiliation off, and my personal view. No, I'm mighty pissed off at the state of the world at the moment. I think it's, I was talking to my son's school, and I said, I think Al Gore said that, he talked about leadership being a renewable resource, and I said actually hope is a renewable resource, and I'm now old enough to see we've had despondent times and hopeful times. We're in a bit of a despondent time. Maybe for those, there's a sort of Macron bounce a bit today. But, we've got, Brexit, I find spectacularly depressing, to be honest. I live in the Netherlands. I'm a citizen of the world. Like many other citizens of the world, I felt personally signalled out recently. But I think the best thing when you have people in high office who maybe challenge things like, the really incredibly robust climate science and the extreme weather we see today, killing people, that it's hugely galvanizing force for everybody else. And I see the development in the business community, fantastic new businesses coming through. There's a company we were working with that can take plastic from methane. It can actually make plastic from CO2 from the air. There's a price differential at the moment. It's climate positive plastic. There's the huge progress in renewable energy, in electric vehicles, in new models for sustainable food delivery. So you look at that and say the potential's fantastic.
Okay.
It's an urgency issue.
So you're not less optimistic now, or are you a little bit?
No, I think it's not the desired outcome, but it's interesting. If you just take a US president who was gung-ho supportive for climate versus one who's not, take those things. The galvanizing force is not to be underestimated. So I think it has reminded every city, every business, every state that actually they have somebody else isn't going to solve this for them. I mean, if I look at We Mean Business, so I co-chair We Mean Business, so to be slightly partisan. So there's a coalition of all the organisations, or many of the organisations working with business on climate. There's more than 700 companies that have made really meaningful commitments, more than 200 companies that are committed to science-based targets. And I know, because I've driven that through in IKEA, it's difficult to do. So these are not making some nice statements. These are difficult to do commitments of major global businesses. Huge numbers of businesses actually stepped up. It's, again, the same sort of number, came out in support of the US staying involved in Paris. If you'd gone back 10 years ago, no way would you have got business communities to step up and say, this is important, it's important for the future of society, the economy and our businesses, please stay engaged. So the galvanizing force is huge. And I'm not just glossing over that.
No.
That's my genuine view.
By the way, I should have said, in about half an hour, probably a little bit less, I'm going to throw it out to you for your questions as well. So do have a think what you want to put to Steve. The other thing I wanted to mention, by the way, at the beginning was I was doing an event for Unilever last year, and it was with the Ad Council, and Keith Weed, who's been on this crowd stage, was one of the panelists as well. And we were talking about making ads a little bit more purposeful, a little bit more valuable and memorable, pretty much in line with Unilever's thinking. And everyone on stage, including me, was asked to pick an ad that really resonated with them. And my link with Steve and IKEA was I picked the IKEA Ad Forest, which was part of the wonderful Everyday campaign, I think.
Nice.
It was beautiful. I mean, I'm not sure if you remember. I wish I had it here, actually. It was a forest full of LED lamps, great soundtrack, a voiceover that said 2016. In 2016, IKEA will sell only energy-efficient LED light bulbs. My question to you, Steve, on the back of that is, this was a big multi-million-pound banner ad for IKEA focused on sustainability. How hard was it to sell that idea to the CEO and the CFO? Because that was very focused, wasn't it?
It was, but Peter Wright, who was our marketing manager in the UK, I was on a UK board at that point in time. Peter was the marketing manager, and it was Peter drove that. He just, with the team, with the support of the organisation in the UK. So it was, and it worked, and it was shared internally. I would say where we've got more potential in the business is doing much more of that. And in the last supervisory board discussion and things like this, we've just said more. We now have built the performance to actually really engage customers, and we've underperformed on that.
But engage them in a different way, right? Because
of course, in a different way.
Yeah, but to what extent did it change the brand, if you like, of IKEA?
It's the brand is based on your total experience of a company. So one advert can help people think a little bit differently. So it did with some people in that. It was, interestingly, over a very rational, and LED's like hyper-rational, 85% more energy efficient, blah, blah, blah. It's hyper-rational product, but the advert was totally emotional.
Yeah.
And it really worked. So it did all the sort of normal things you want an advert to do in terms of sales and visitation and interest. It did that, and it had an emotional and trust context to it as well. But and we've done other things in different countries, which have, we've done some interesting ones in Norway, in Belgium, but we've not done it, I think, to the scale we could, and the intent is there to do more of it in the future.
Okay. You talked just now, and I think it's well known that you went in when you applied to this job at IKEA. You went in and said to the CEO that incremental, if you want incremental change, it's I'm not your guy.
With
you
humility.
want transformational. I was going to say actually, because you talked about naivety and humility. I mean, it doesn't smack of someone who's that much naivety or humility, really.
It doesn't. No, but I mean, it sounds sort of like it could be this sort of arrogant, kick you out of the room sort of statement. But no, I just said what I'm not.
Right.
Just to be clear, I just said I'm not the person who's going to proofread the 100-page sustainability report. It needs to be done, but other people will do that. I did find myself 6 months later proofreading the 100-page sustainability report, but they never very well. But and I just said, really, I'm in this to really drive transformational change. So I said, if you're interested in being incrementally less bad, I'm the wrong guy.
I guess the reason I'm asking the question is...
But Mikhail, just to finish off on that, Axel, Mikhail, who is a good friend, our former CEO, I had coffee with him on Friday. Mikhail's face lit up in a big smile when I said that. And that was, if you're not desperate for a job because you can't feed your family and you've got hopefully some choice, you want to have a very honest conversation with humility. I have huge respect for the people in the business who do very challenging jobs. There's fantastic, brilliant people who know lots of stuff I don't in the business, and are a hugely talented CEO. You have respect for that, but you have to be clear about, actually, I'm only going to be, if you want to really drive change in the business, then I'm the right person for you. If you don't, let's end the conversation.
Did you know that he was going to say, yes,
No.
we want that?
No.
You didn't? So you didn't know that IKEA and Mikhail were totally on board with this when you walked in that door?
I thought IKEA is always a fascinating business, and it touches so many things. And I do think we've got to be able to get sustainability. It can't be a luxury good for the few. It's got to be in everybody's home. It's got to be about every product and service. So IKEA was an interesting company, but I was CEO of the climate group. I wasn't quite ready to leave.
Right.
I almost didn't go to the conversation. I don't know if Andy James is still there at the back, actually. There's a friend of mine who's actually helped place me in that as a recruitment agent.
I guess one of the other reasons I asked, Steve, is because, again, look, I don't want to push this one too hard, but it's how hard would that be to do in a publicly listed company in the energy sector, for example? Do you know what I mean? I mean, was it easy to do that if walking in through IKEA's door? Would you have done it in Shell or ExxonMobil?
I might have, well, in ExxonMobil, I think if they'd mistakenly let me into the building, it would have probably been a pretty short conversation. Short but memorable. If it comes back to what I said about context. So I think, some of the energy companies, I mean, there's still a role to play. We're still going to, people are going to get in a taxi with diesel in it, probably over the next week. Most people in the room will, and or whatever. So the oil and gas companies are here for a long time, but they don't have. I don't think they have a plan for the future. So I think there is a plan for the future for them, and I think that the honest conversation and the plan is actually ramp down your fossil fuels and have a really genuine 2-degree plan, because any other plan's not going to be an option. So I think you should, if that's the change you want to have, if you don't say it at that interview stage, again, with humility, not knowing all the answers.
You've got to be bold.
But I think if you're coming into a leadership role, if at that point in time you don't say, I intend to lead in this role, then you...
And understood. And did you were put on the executive committee as well? Did you ask to be put on that executive committee?
I wouldn't have taken I know other people who are actually high impact CSOs who aren't on the exec committee. For me, I knew, you're either at the table or you're part of the menu.
And are you saying that if you're not on the executive committee, you are part of the menu?
Yeah, and it's not because people are evil, nasty people. It's just everybody's busy. There's a limited leadership bandwidth. There's only so many change initiatives. Even in a huge business, there's only so many things you can prioritise. And so you're sort of squeezed out. And so you have to be there at the table. And at the sort of 2 years in, I realised I had the passive support. The worst I had was the passive support of people around the table. And leaving now, I realised I had the active support. You have the active support with other people leading on sustainability before you. And that's when you can constantly have the conversations you need to have.
Was that? Did you know, just delving a little deeper into this? Did you ever feel? You know, I'm being a little bit, you know, again, we'll come to some of the targets you put in place. I mean, 79 million LEDs last year, 50 million by 2020 is the target.
500.
Sorry, 500 million is the target by 2020, which fits, by the way, very nicely in with Christiana's Mission 2020.
It does.
The energy independence piece as well. Did you ever feel, God, some of the guys in this company feel I'm being a bit too authoritarian here?
Not authoritarian. Many other things, but I did when I spoke to one of the guys. I had a leaving coffee on Friday, and I was thanking one of the team because I said, John, you were partially responsible, you know, for our whole energy independence push, and that's just because I said, John, how much will it cost for us to go energy independent? Because we'd invested in like one wind farm at that point in time, and he said, really? I said, really? And he came back a sort of day later and said, we think it's about 1.5 billion. So I then went into Mikhail's office and said, Mikhail, it's going to cost us 1.5 billion to go energy independent. We've got the money there. I think we should do it. What do you think? And he phoned me back later that night and said, let's do it. But the change doesn't always happen that easily.
If it was a publicly listed company, it wouldn't have been this easy,
no,
would it?
but if you actually look, to be honest, if you look
or
at
would it? I'm playing devil's advocate.
I think it depends where you sit and how decisions are made. And for us, that was a hugely positive. So our sustainability investing, I think, has created about 800 million of extra value for the business, rather than if we'd not done it. And I think that's actually significantly more than paid my salary over the last few years. So, you know, I think as long as you have a good business case behind it, it's not just we love wind farms. It's we're going to get a better return than the alternative use of the capital. You know, when you have, and lots of businesses today have excess liquidity, as they discuss it. You know, they have money that they can't invest in the running business. They have significant amounts of cash piles, and actually you can deploy them far more effectively to create better value and better returns for the business. And I think that makes just as much sense in a listed company as an unlisted company. Probably the difference is, I think if you're in a business that's fundamentally struggling, then the things you can do are different. You've got to be more selective. They've got to be things that deliver really good returns faster. The business case needs to be that much sharper. Execution has to be simpler. If you're in a business that's moving forwards, you've got lots more.
And I imagine, you know, the former, there's a little bit more cynicism around that table, isn't there? The board table. Surely, if you're spending a lot of money on this stuff, and times are very, very hard for the company and for the shareholders in the company, whether you agree with that or not.
Yeah, I've not been in that context, but right. I'm sure I've spoken to people in that context. It's tougher to do, quite frankly. I mean, when businesses are challenged, they retreat to basics. Drive sales, lower costs. Drive sales, lower costs. Kind of basics.
You've said in the past that you knew IKEA was a company serious about sustainability. Are you encouraged, and again this is something we speak to most of the guests on this stage about, are you encouraged that we're seeing enough companies now getting serious about this issue?
I think I'm encouraged by the innovation pipeline. So what's going on in the sort of growth companies, the entrepreneurs, emerging technologies, I think is hugely exciting. I think we need more big companies to get really serious. And I think that there's, you know, is it Margaret Mead that said that the only person that likes change is a wet baby? And
I hadn't heard that.
I think the other one is all change begins with hypocrisy, which I think is unkind. Actually, I think change starts with good intentions. So you start with a pilot initiative or a flagship initiative that is not in terms of the total business. I think this is where it's okay. You know, some people might look at something and say it's greenwashing if it's a small project. But actually, if it gets people excited in the business, if it gets their attention, if it drives co-worker pride or reputational benefit or sales or whatever, then they build confidence to do more. But I don't see that many big businesses where you say they really get this. They look at this world, climate change and resource scarcity massively urgent. You know, the climate change, Johan Rockström, you know, and you had Christiana last month, but, you know, half emissions every decade. You know, at the same time as lift people out of poverty, energy access for many more people, build cities at an unprecedented rate. You know, we have a challenge and an opportunity there, but it's about urgency. I think the business community is moving in the right direction, but needs to accelerate.
Okay. We talked about two transformative moments at IKEA. Is it IKEA or IKEA?
However you want to say it.
Well, how do they say it?
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
The LEDs and the energy independence. Any other big transformative moments, movements at this company?
Sustainable sourcing. I mean, you know, whether it's the seafood, so there's 23 species of fish and seafood. IKEA sells 800,000 salmon. It's not a salmon this big, it's about this big. Salmon a year. And, you know, those are all ASC or MSC certified now. Complex supply chains. Crayfish coming out of paddy fields as a co-product and things like this. The FSC ahead of targets, big change. It's, you know, and it's resulted in an area of forest being certified in partnership with WWF about 40 million hectares now, so bigger than Germany. The sustainable cotton, so better cotton is all of the cotton's been transformed, etc. So root and branch in sourcing, IWA compliance. The last things we've been pushing fair wage, and I think if you look at fair and living wage assessments across the business, so here in the UK and the US I think is on its fourth rise for living wages. In Japan, we found out that looked at a deep dive, and you could pay people a lower hourly rate for part-time work than for full-time work. And it created a real incentive to have part-time workers. There was a gender split, historical gender split that had built up over time that was totally unacceptable to us as a business, where you had mostly male full-time workers and female part-time workers. So we said, basically, we'll equalise hourly pay at a living wage rate for part-time and full-time workers. It took away the business case for part-time work, created thousands of full-time jobs for women in a sector that was still backwards. Yeah. So lots. I think the social dimension, actually, we haven't talked so strongly.
No,
but that's absolutely fundamental to me.
And it leads me on to this question, and maybe this is a little bit unfair, but do you feel that you've been overly focused on climate change? And I'm sure you've been asked this before, you know, at the expense of other issues, whether it's social or human rights or diversity, etc., etc.
You know, it's interesting how many things you can lead on at once. But what we did there was a good IWA compliance team, really robust on our code of conduct, which fortunately was there when I came into the business. We accelerated it to get to full IWA. So we said sort of non-compliance is no longer an option. And we had things like in China, there was all IWA components were there except for working hours, because people were working, every manufacturing facility in China pretty much was working extraordinarily long working hours. And there was some sort of a view that people in China like to work longer. You know, in other ways, everyone's exactly the same, more or less. They're all humans. No, people wanted to earn a certain amount of money. So we basically, over 3 years, brought that down to, you know, it's now 49 hours a week max. It's guaranteed one day, at least one day off in 7. Massive change, 165,000 people affected. So what we've talked about publicly is, for me, it's absolutely fundamental to a business that your supply chain is people who have decent jobs. Anybody should be able to be filmed, and it should be on YouTube with their permission. And if you say that's not a decent job, you should be ashamed of yourself as a business if your business isn't based on that. So based on 20 years of improvement before, we accelerated that deeply and started to do things like these fair wage assessments to say, let's make sure that people have a living wage as well, that they can, and we're not all the way through that, but we're driving that approach right the way across the business. So I think we've done a lot on that. On diversity and inclusion, you know, as a Swedish-founded business, there was a strong, it was sort of intuitive approach around that, and particularly on gender. You know, more than 40% of the extent of the wider management were women, and the trajectory was to get to, you know, you could see we're heading towards that 50%. And took additional initiatives there, a women's open network, really looking at have we got equal pay everywhere in every department for men and women, doing things like actually making sure you also had the same rights around paternity and maternity wherever possible. And then what we'd not done is we'd done selective work around LGBT issues. But it was interesting, because people were I'd say it's a very values-driven humanistic business who just assumes, yeah, of course, everybody's welcome. We don't, we're a non-discriminatory business. But it's when you realise when society still discriminates, you have to be explicit and proactive around your policies. Yeah. So we've put a whole diversity and inclusion approach in, and we've been much more explicit about that, about how we've celebrated that internally in the business, made some really key decisions. So, like in the US, if you're transgender, the company will support transgender surgery for you if that's an option you choose to take. So we've done actually on the social side. There's been a huge transformation, but I regard that as it's doesn't need to have quite as strong a public profile as climate did as an issue, and we also had to. I think we needed to be farther along that journey before we were more vocal about it.
Okay, just very quickly, I wanted to ask this but forgot to ask it. Back to the sort of transformative corporate change. You've also talked about a circular IKEA that repairs and moves towards repairing and recycling products. How close are you to really making that work?
It's always good to leave something for your successors to do. I think it'd be dull for them.
That's the challenge, right?
No, I think it's for us. It's if you can actually provide a table. So take a lac table. So it's a coffee table. It's actually in some markets it's cheaper than a certain company's coffee at Kastrup Airport in Copenhagen. So you can have a coffee table for cheaper than a coffee, It's from certified forestry. People are paid a living wage. The factory's renewably powered. It's breathtakingly efficient to you, but it's, the reverse logistics of that are really hard. So it's so easy to destroy value in this process. So I think it's a long journey. But I think there's now, in terms of the change of relationship with customers, we've now started to do a lot of innovation around it. So there's now more than 1 million spare parts provided for free to people so people can have products that, if there's one component that's gone, you can get that component and then the product can have longer life. We've been actually starting to do, from a quality point of view, have a much more open approach to actually people rating, open customer ratings, so we understand much more dynamically in a modern way how people rate and relate the products. Are our products, lasting as long as people expect them to around that? Durability is fundamentally important in a circular world. And then we've done a whole set of things like having second life areas in stores where people can actually resell products. They get a gift voucher. It's sold for the price of the gift voucher. It's marketed within the store, or we've been supporting second-hand channels for that. We've been doing a whole range of initiatives around it. We did a big initiative in the US around it to help it. But I would say it's early days, because the complexity to be solved is the reverse logistics. The first bits we've solved, so we've got close to 100% recycling in the vast majority of stores now, and where, rather than plastics, mixed waste, what was a cost for the business in waste disposal, has become a revenue stream. Okay. And we're even making our own products. So we've closed the loop. So we're making our own products out of the cardboard and the plastic. Now
that you're leaving, I guess it's a fair question. Is there anything you're really disappointed with? Is there anything you wish you'd done? Is there anything you feel you failed at over the 6 years?
Yeah, many small things were failed at. You've got to try them. Yeah, I think. I do think, and this is not, we've got fantastic people in communications, so I'm not criticising our communications colleagues, and our Chief Marketing Officer Claudia is a brilliant colleague. So, but if you look we're very decentralised as a business. We could have engaged customers much more on this. And if you think this is a sort of DNA retailing behaviour, our marketing people would love to do more of those sort of campaigns, that nice advert in the forest. Yeah. But if you can just talk about low prices and sales, you know that people
Which
are
is
coming
why I
in 2
asked
weeks.
about the changing image,
Yeah.
you know.
Well,
of
so
the
I don't
company.
think, I don't think in the stakeholder community, I think people look at the business very differently today from a few years ago. The wider customers, people have started to notice, engage around it, but we've only just, and we measure this, we've just seen really the beginnings of that come through. And I think it's actually important. People want to know, when we've asked customers, and we've told them what we've been doing in focus groups around the world and things like that, people have said, if you were doing things like that, why don't you tell us? We like IKEA, but we'd no idea you're doing that stuff. Now, and there might be, nobody's going to read the sustainability report, really. I don't know what the total, all the work that goes into those sustainability reports, sorry, sustainability reporting people, they have a pretty tight readership.
Yes.
So, you have to make it has to be part of your marketing. It has to be, and we've made it more part of the
Hence the Keith Weeds being marketing, sustainability,
yes,
whatever.
It is, yeah.
Unilever's, right?
But then still, if you break it down to individual brands, and they're a fantastic company. We work closely with the Unilever guys and others, but they've broken through on some fronts, but not on others. And I think it's increasingly, nobody says, I'd really like something really unsustainable. Have you got anything that's really linked to exploitation of people, that's forest destruction? Nobody ever asks you for that. Now, is it the fundamental reason why? No. But for most people, does it add pride and value to the products they have? Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And every product has a story. And I think if I've said we could have done a better job of telling those stories, and there's only upside. It's just complex.
The going all in, the 100% targets, that focus on, I guess, complete success, if you like. Are you a difficult person to work with?
I'm probably not the right person to ask. People have worked with me in this room before. Am I a difficult person? Sheila, am I a difficult person to work with? That puts you on the spot, doesn't it? So I don't think. No,
we'll
I mean,
let off the hook.
no. But if you sort of, in all honesty, I probably am sometimes. But I'm fundamentally respectful of. If I look at IKEA, breathtaking logistics. Really hard people working in a store. Like a Beijing store, a Shanghai store where 6 million people come through it. It's just incredible. A relatively small team of people doing, and in many businesses, the people who really make good businesses tick, even if they're not perfect businesses, all businesses can be improved. And I know, obviously, after 6 years in the exec team, you know where the improvement potential lies. But so if you respect the roles of your colleagues around you, and you can only lead when you lead together. But the fact is, I think my colleagues have expected that I take a strong stance around these things. And as they've got to know, it's not an unreasonable stance. It is to make a better business. It is values-driven. It is about principles. And I've said frequently, you have to take a stand on principles and values and then create the business case to make it work.
Yeah. I'm going to come to what you plan to do next in just a moment, but I want to open this up to our audience for some of their questions first, if I could.